Hi, welcome to Tinfoil Handkerchief Alignment, and today we're going to talk about the throat chakra and how it can impact our interpersonal communications, personal truth, and the ways we express ourselves. The throat chakra is the fifth chakra and is located in the middle of the throat. While our creative energy mostly comes from the sacral chakra and our expressions of love and creativity are associated with the heart chakra, overall communication, expression, and articulation corresponds to the throat chakra. Though a balanced throat chakra helps us with personal truth and speaking honestly, it also helps improve how we listen to and hear others. There is a difference between listening and hearing, which I think is an important distinction to make, especially as it pertains to how we interact with and build relationships with others. Although I do believe this pertains to the ability to hear, I think it has more to do with how we listen and process information as much as it does to the actual sense of hearing. I think it's important when we're conversing with others to consider whether we are listening to respond or listening to understand. And I think that's where the difference is. If you're listening just to respond, and mostly in a fairly standard fashion, you're not really hearing. Making this distinction is actually something I consider to be a benchmark for a healthy, authentic relationship, any kind of relationship, because there's a difference between listening just to respond and hearing what someone is saying. There are a lot of people who kind of sugarcoat what they're saying to others, which could be a lot of things like downplaying emotions or not really saying how you feel. You say things, others respond, that kind of thing. It's like the whole, how's your day? Good, you? But within that, there's so much more nuance and so many things that are going on in the background, right? Because it's almost like we expect people to want to know more, but they don't necessarily ask. So my personal opinion is that's what causes people to feel unheard or undervalued. However, I do think a lot of that comes from lack of or just overall miscommunication on both sides, which happens more when people aren't honest with what they're looking for in terms of emotional support or expectations of how they communicate within relationships. I say it like that because I feel like we often expect people to hear us, want responses or validations based on the things that we don't actually say. But it won't truly be a two-way conversation, and you can't really expect people to understand without honesty or not being clear about expectations of what feeling heard means to you. Though hearing is the sense that's associated with the throat chakra, I interpret it as more than just listening. It's about picking up on the details, which I would consider listening with our other senses. I was talking about that in the solar plexus episode as well, where I was talking about how like your gut feeling is like seeing with your other senses. It's the same kind of thing. In my opinion, in terms of having a conversation, hearing is more about the things that people don't say than what they do. Mannerisms, tone, and reaction can say more than we often give them credit for. Sometimes it's a matter of just paying attention. In long-term relationships, again, any kind of relationship, you do pick up on mannerisms and reactions, but how do you provide emotional support or react yourself when you notice them? For example, when I see someone get fidgety, I usually believe them to be anxious about something. Though they may not say it, they might even deny it, and I could be totally wrong in that moment. But I will still usually try to say something reassuring or confidence boosting to help make them less so. They don't have to say that's what they need, but I also am aware that a little reassurance can go a long way. So I try to reassure other people in a moment where maybe they're feeling a little bit more nervous. Being kind to other people costs absolutely nothing, and you can really make a difference in someone's day by just being kind. So I try to do things like that to help brighten people's days a little bit more, especially when it comes to them being nervous or fidgety or something like that. Just someone letting them know that they're thinking about how they're doing in that moment can help improve their overall mood and situation. If needs aren't specified, I could just not say anything. I will say something in the moment. Sometimes that can be the most impactful in moments when they feel small or like no one sees or understands them. The better you hear, the better you understand. And again, when I'm talking about hearing, I'm not exclusively referring to the actual sense of hearing. I'm referring to being able to read the overall situation. The more you demonstrate understanding and that you're truly listening, even to the things they don't say, the more likely they are to open up to you, which in turn builds a more authentic connection and better communication overall within it. I've said before that sometimes it can be hard for people to articulate how they feel about something, especially if they don't fully understand or haven't sorted through their feelings within a situation enough to be able to explain it to other people. I think it's moments like that when people need to feel heard the most, regardless of how much they actually say. I've also said before that although advice is helpful, it's often offered from a place of how others would handle your situation if they were in it, which can be helpful as far as experience with a similar situation goes, but everyone's circumstances are different, even slightly. So it's important to learn to discern what advice is actually helpful and the adjustments that work within your own situation and within your own life. Although I would like to believe that a lot of people mean well, if they're offering advice from an unhealed space within themselves, it's likely not going to help heal that space within you. And I find when people are more focused on listening to respond, their responses are more about advice than actual emotional support. Advice isn't always the best way to help. Sometimes all people need is comfort in the moment, and that could be something as simple as someone sitting with them or showing that they care. It's also important to remember that not everyone feels emotions the same way, even if we call it the same emotion. So sometimes people will give certain advice to try to make your feelings of the situation more comparable to theirs and on a comparable depth. They might not even intend it that way. I actually think that many will do it unintentionally so that they feel validated in how they feel with their own emotions about the same kind of situation or a similar one. All that to say, I think the better we can truly hear others, the better able we are to understand others, which makes connections more genuine and people more approachable. People feeling heard within relationships, again, that pertains to relationships of any kind, overall communication is better and there is much less resentment that builds up over time. Though maybe there could be in other areas, improving communication will allow for better discussion within those other areas as well. And you'll feel more comfortable having those conversations, even though some might be challenging and some situations are hard. Further to that, I think it helps others feel seen. The broken pieces that maybe they're not as open to talking about, you don't have to point them out to them, but if you're able to provide emotional support in those areas, it will help heal those broken pieces. I will say, though, that's not always well received if someone isn't willing to take a look at or acknowledge their own broken pieces or holes within self. It can be disconcerting to feel so seen, and especially if you're used to feeling misunderstood or unheard or not speaking about it, particularly within those aspects. It can feel really vulnerable, but that's where I think that making someone feel heard or seen can also build trust and more foundationally strong connections. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying rely on others to help you heal. What I think it really comes down to is that most of us struggle with the unhealed aspects within self and don't unconditionally love ourselves enough to believe that others will. Honest communication about how or where we hurt allows for more positive growth, encourages truthfulness, and a better ability to express ourselves more authentically. And I've found that that helps rebalance aspects within the throat chakra that I find many people tend to struggle with. The more we feel confident in being truthful to ourselves, the more we're able to bring that to our intimate relationships and then eventually our interpersonal ones. It also helps rebalance aspects in other chakras to be a healthier baseline and more calm and stable overall. It makes us more emotionally intelligent. Like I said, it's a matter of balancing those aspects within self and in this particular instance within the throat chakra. But like I mentioned in the Aries episode, I'm also the type of person who appreciates direct and honest communication. And there is a difference in being honest in a constructive way to help others grow and being honest in a way that's just mean. It's about intention and delivery, which takes balancing aspects within self to be able to achieve that, because not everyone is receptive in the same way or to the same things. And when I talk about the sense of hearing as it pertains to the throat chakra, I would also say that includes the ability to understand how we speak to different people in a way that makes most sense to them. That doesn't always mean oversimplifying, because details or importance can get left out or misinterpreted within that, in terms of how they communicate and how emotionally open they are. Further to that, still on the sense of hearing, I wouldn't say it exclusively applies to how we gauge the emotional needs of others. I think it also applies to receptivity within ourselves to constructive criticism. Again, discernment is important within that, which helps you better understand what's actually constructive criticism that can help you grow, heal, and be a better version of yourself, and what's just criticizing to make you feel bad, less valuable, or less confident. But I would also say that discernment is a part of hearing as well. Being able to evaluate conversations or communications to determine intention and authenticity within them. And in a way that's not uncompromising or overly stubborn. As I've said before, I'm not a medical professional. I'm just talking about my interpretations of how energetic imbalances can present themselves as symptoms. Self-expression as it pertains to the throat chakra, I interpret it more as how we communicate with others. Communication itself comes in many forms. Even just creative expression comes in many forms. The throat chakra is represented by the color blue, which is calming and conversational. It's also connected to the element of space or ether, which is essentially the space between, which would also make sense going back to how hearing and seeing the unsaid things can help better emotionally support others. Balance within the throat chakra and energetic body overall, communication can be rational and moderate, even with those with whom you don't agree with on everything. You can still be confident in your authenticity and speak honestly while being a voice of reason and still not necessarily agreeing with others. It can actually bring more calm and compromise to situations. Again, in terms of that, I think it goes back to discernment and healing aspects within self, which helps us see situations more clearly. But that balance often comes from thinking of others before prioritizing yourself and personal desires or accolades. It also involves being fair to others, even if they disagree with you or you see them as a competitor, or not as confident in how they express or communicate for themselves. Not in a way that's speaking for them or telling them how they should feel. It's about making sure everyone feels heard and valued. I always say that just because some traits are more negatively attuned doesn't mean they always have to be. That's why healing those aspects within self are so important. Though some may require a little bit more love in terms of trying to heal than maybe others would, both in terms of how we express thoughts and feelings and how we interpret them from others. As far as crystals go, I personally love lapis lazuli, which is what I use most, but I do often incorporate sodalite, amazonite, and kyanite. And I personally love this amazonite because it looks like a wave on the beach. Lapis lazuli helps with mental and emotional clarity. It helps with releasing emotional baggage and can also help with self-acceptance and bringing in just an overall sense of calm. Sodalite helps sort through confusion to bring clarity and rational, logical thinking. It also helps to find confidence in personal truth, which in turn helps your overall self-esteem. It also helps cleanse energetic effects that emanate from tech devices such as cell phones. Amazonite does as well. I actually usually keep this between me and my TV. Kyanite helps maintain focus through distractions and helps improve concentration and memory. It can also help with intuition, meditation, and understanding or discerning your dreams. And it can help with aligning all your chakras. It doesn't hold on to negative energy unlike most crystals, so it doesn't actually require any cleansing either. Most of the stones that can help rebalance the chakra are blue, though not all blue stones make the most sense or are the most impactful for balancing within the throat chakra. As I've previously mentioned, with color, sound, crystals, and scents, strength and vibrancy can influence impact. Attuning to yourself will allow you to be better able to determine how much or how little of each tool you need to rebalance within. And again, the more attuned to yourself you become, the better you'll understand what you need to help you rebalance, and you'll develop your personal favorites as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this overview of the throat chakra. If you're interested in booking any personal services, check out my Etsy shop or check out my other YouTube channel, Tinfoil Handkerchief Tarot. Until next time, keep the peace.